In the King James Version of the Scriptures the word beguiled is used in 5 verses. Yet, the author's actual written word is entirely different, as we shall see. Here are the 5 verses that used beguiled. It was used 4 times in the Old Testament and once in the New Testament. Using the Strong's Concordance, I am able to search beguiled as used in these verses and see the author's actual written word. We know the authors did not write in English but Aramaic or Chaldee in the Old Testament and Ancient or Old Greek in the New Testament. Thus, I have done so and paired the words with the prospective verses. Pay attention to the definition for each word. You will notice it gives a much more meaning that the English translated word beguiled does not. Do you see how the definition of the author's actual written word provided the truth? With that, let's take a closer look at the verses pertaining to Eve. In Genesis 3 verse 13 the author wrote the Aramaic/Chaldee word nasha, and its definition is to delude mentally or morally seduce. In 2 Corinthians 11 verse 3 the author wrote the ancient Greek word exapatao, and its definition is to seduce wholly. We see that 2 total different words from different languages have the same definition with the type of deception that occurred between Eve and the serpent. Now keep this truth in your mind as you read these scriptures to see if the verses expound on this truth. Notice in Genesis 5 verses 1 to 3. Cain is not mentioned in the generations of Adam. In Genesis 3 verse 15 there is a clear distinction between the serpent's seed or offspring and Eve's seed or offspring. In Genesis 3 verse 16 God continues his condemnation of what has occurred between the serpent and Eve and tells Eve she is condemned to have a painful birth. Notice the author's actual word for sorrow. Is this why Cain is not mentioned in Adam's generation per 1 John 3 verse 12? In Matthew 13 verses 36 to 43 Christ had to explain in private to his disciples the meaning of the wheat and tares parable. Christ clearly states what tares refer to and whose children they are of. After reading those verses it is quite obvious something carnal occurred between the serpent and Eve. Cain's seed or offspring are called Cainites. Using the Strong's Concordance we can see how Cain and Cainites are spelled and their connection. Please do your own due diligence and study it for yourself. The Strong Concordance is a great tool to reveal the author's written word with definition.